And then departments absorbing all the increases in employee wage and benefit costs. I'll talk later about what those were. Utilizing attrition where possible before layoffs and then mandatory time off. Attrition has been utilized well and frequently by all of the departments, and that's why we're in a position where we're not looking at layoffs, because departments have been able to determine which positions cannot, should not be filled, and act accordingly. However, we do reserve the right to continue to look at layoffs and mandatory time off between now and the final budget, because there are other budget impacts that may come up between now and then that are not included in this proposed budget. And we also want to look at, as I'll talk later, about how we're dealing with teeter and, you know, what balancing we're doing kind of on the backs of teeter at this point. We also talked about no funding for new projects or groups, and anything that is new coming up is going to be referred to the board in the final budget hearing. An example of that would be the Arts Council request for funds. That is something that, yes, we're aware of it, we've got it, and that will be that will come up at the final budget hearing, and we'll see what our funding sources look like at that time. In terms of using fees, the juxtaposition of the fee hearings with the budget process is how we're trying to make sure that there is a connection and that fee increases needed for budget issues are in fact addressed at the same time, so we know whether they're part of the budget or they're not. Adhering to the debt reduction policy, again, all the attention focuses in on teeter at this point. And building reserves to goal levels, we have made no progress in that regard this budget. And in terms of incorporating major maintenance projects and capital improvement plan into the budget process, we are doing that. It's not being funded at an ideal level, but that discussion did take place, and it has been incorporated into the budget to the extent we can fund it. And then just focusing on streamlining procedures, et cetera. So the restructuring guidelines, again, you've seen this before, but the three areas we're focusing on are efficiencies in the courthouse transfer process, and due to the county council's efforts as well as GSA and executive office, the Fort Bragg transfer will, we hope, be on the June 24th agenda, so that is actually going to happen. It is dependent on the administrative office of the courts getting us a signed copy back in time, so that's what we're doing there. And then we are in discussions right now about the Willits operations and how that would take place, since AOC themselves has identified that in their courthouse planning for Ukiah in the future that the Willits courthouse would be closed down, or the operations up there. We also are moving forward with the Health and Human Services Agency integration into systems of care, and you've heard Carmel talk about that, and that will be continuing. And a number of the personnel resolutions that you have passed lately are in fact moving positions into place for optimal funding and to either preserve the services at no increased county cost or to, you know, reduce costs altogether. And then finally, streamlining public resources services among those departments, and that is an effort that the executive office is working with those departments, and that continues. Okay, revenue guidelines. Tom referred to that, our CEO referred to that in his budget message, so I'm not going to go over it, but we also take what John's comments were around looking at kind of the assessment of properties, and that is something that we will definitely be looking at in this process over the next year. So compensation. The budgeted, we've budgeted the market adjustment per the salary survey results that will go into effect on in July of 2008, and then the cost of living adjustment that will go in to effect January of 2009. As that is reflected in the budget right now, it's about a $3.3 million difference in the salary line items from the previous year's budget to this year's budget. So in general terms, that's what represents across the board all of the increases. It also will include merit increases as well, so for ongoing employees. So you need to take that into account, but that is where this gets reflected. And then in terms of the health plan increase, the difference between what was budgeted last year and what is budgeted this year is about $1.4 million. So that's the impact on the budgets that we're looking at. So moving on to debts and liabilities, this is a key part of what we're trying to do here, and obviously we want to adhere to those schedules to the extent possible, and we have, except for Teeter, and I'll go into that more specifically. This is just a quick explanation of what the Teeter plan is about, again, more for the public, since I know you've seen this before. Just remember, the liability right now is around $9 million, and that's what we are paying interest on going forward. So, in refining the Teeter plan, you asked us last year to set it up in its own budget unit. It has been set up in its own budget unit. It's 1930, and it is now on its own. And what's in there is the debt, and also what's in there now are the revenues that are coming in from the past taxes being paid, the penalties on those, or any sales of property that then go towards those tax liabilities. So we've created the separate budget unit. We've put all of those funds in there, and if all of the funds stayed in there, that would be $5.1 million against that $9 million plus the interest payments. The next chart talks specifically about debts and liabilities. I've cleared out some of the other ones because you've seen this chart before that has ADA and finance system and all that. These are the ones that are truly debts. And this lists the certificates of participation, or COPs, as they've been referred to, the pension obligation bonds, or POBs, and the underfunded pension obligation bond debt, which was the shortfall in the account out of which those were paid. Now, this is the impact on our budget. These are, in fact, included in the retirement contribution that the county makes towards the retirement system. They build these debts into it, and that goes towards the percentage that was discussed with you earlier this year. So that's why you didn't see it on the spreadsheet. It's reflected in the retirement contributions that come through all of the departments as part of their salary and wage series, 1000 series.
Supervisor.
So all except for the $2.7 million to deal with the Teeter plan is in the budget. But the difference is not in the budget, right?
Okay, well, let me get to that.
The COPs and the pension